Cisco, and with HP and many others in the traditional data center space. And so with that partnership, we have a very broad ecosystem of resources that we can pull together when solutioning for your environment. Next, we also have a very creative and impressive FinOps expertise that we introduce when adopting the cloud environment. We all know that costing in the cloud is something of a great concern to many of our customers and our people. And introducing FinOps from the beginning, when we're creating the landing zone, when we're automating the landing zone, is a high priority for us so that the customer has to think less about those types of things. The less we can have hands-on and the more we can automate these processes in FinOps and the cloud and the cost optimizations, the better. And that's how we see it. And last of all, we have a great and deep background with digital workplace. E360's digital workplace expertise and reputation is well known throughout the industry. We are absolutely the go-to partner for many of the companies here in California, as well as the entire Pacific coast of the US, as well as Arizona, for this traditional capability. And now, as we get into that detail, I'd like to turn some time over to David. One piece of housekeeping I will bring up is, obviously, we're all excited to make some of our Nike shoes today. And so right after the presentation, we're going to get into that explanation. We'll bring up the website and we'll go through the process of making our Nike shoes. And while you're doing that, you'll be able to go out, have a bite to eat if you're here locally, or if you're at home, you can do that there, and get that taken care of. So without further ado, David White, I'd like to bring you to the podium.
Thank you. And thank you to our partners at E360 for facilitating this event with us. Before I kick off, my name is David White. I am the global lead for infrastructure modernization within the solutions engineering organization at Google. Prior to coming to Google about 3 years ago as part of an acquisition, I've actually spent most of my life on your side of the table. So I've been CIO, COO, VP IT, probably spent a fair amount of time with cage nut scars on my hands, racking and stacking, and going through the whole evolution that many of us have gone through over the last several decades of technology. So with that, let me tell you a story. Once upon a time, work was a place that you went to. You got up in the morning, you got dressed, you had your coffee, and you went to work. And when you went to work, it cost you time and it would cost you money, but that was what you did. That's what it meant to work. And the nice thing about it on the technology side was you could wrap the whole work environment in a security blanket. You could cover it with firewalls and antivirus. If anything happened to any system, you could walk over and you could physically touch it. You could fix it, you could replace it, you could do whatever needed to be done. And that was great. And then the world changed. And work no longer became a place. Work became the thing that you did. And where did you do it? You did it from home. And so now, all of a sudden, for everybody in technology, you have to address the fact that your security to your organization is limited by the $99 router that somebody bought at Best Buy and what their kids are doing on the internet that day. That's your security posture. I would be happy to. Is that better? Okay. So what happens next? Well, we continue to live in this fantasy. And the fantasy is that nothing changed because we're not really doing that much that's different. Except now the viruses and the malware and the ransomware and the phishing attacks are coming into people's homes. They're not coming into the office where we can be there to help protect them. We have to do everything remotely. And so we still do our antivirus and anti-malware and anti-ransomware, and we use VPN for protection into people's homes. And again, we pretend nothing changed. And in order to further that fantasy, we use technology like remote access and remote backup to simulate the fact that people really are no longer in a place called work anymore. Isn't there a better way to do this? There's got to be a better way to do this. And guess what? There is a better way to do this. As we went out and we talked to customers, we talked to partners about what it is they really wanted. What they really wanted turned out to be what Google was already doing. And what Google has already been doing is fundamentally shifting how work gets done. When we talk to customers, our customers tell us over and over again, they need to be making smart investments. They don't want to be putting out large stacks of capital. They need to be able to pay for what they need when they need it. Going into a recession, cash is going to be king. Companies are looking to hold on to as many dollars right now as they can and put off those large capital purchases. At the same time, the availability of skilled technical resources are becoming increasingly in short supply. So how do you make the best advantage of the resources you have in order to maximize the value of those employees, have them delivering on true business initiatives, but at the same time, you have to maintain your security posture. In a world where ransomware and viruses are rife, you have to protect your most important corporate assets, which are really your customers. So how do you do that? What we've done at Google is fundamentally shift the point of compute off of the endpoint. Get it off the laptop, put it in cloud. By doing that one simple thing, you decrease the complexity of your environment, making it easier to manage, you decrease the cost to operate, and you lower your security risk. So what does that look like? For us, that looks like basically 4 flavors of technology. The endpoint itself, Chromebooks. Everybody thinks of Chromebooks as cheap alternatives to laptops, thin clients, a way to get into a virtual desktop environment. And they are that, but they are also so much more. Anything browser-based, anything web-based, you can access natively from the Chromebook. The Chromebook is built from the ground up with security at its heart. There has never been a ransomware attack on a Chromebook. I'm going to say that one more time. There has never been a ransomware attack on a Chromebook because there's nothing to hold on to. When you combine that with our zero trust networking layer, you are able to support your corporate security policies without forcing people into a VDI environment solely for the purpose of enforcing your corporate security policies. Marry that with our Google Workspace, born in cloud productivity collaboration toolkit, and then augment it with virtual desktop where you need it. And where you need it is primarily accessing legacy applications or taking advantage of the scalability and capabilities of cloud. When you need those great big data science workstations, when you want access to those GPUs, bring them up and then turn them off and stop paying for them. This is fundamentally how Google works. That's what it means to work like Google. So when we start with the endpoint, again, 0 reported ransomware attacks ever. There's nothing to hold on to. There's nothing for viruses to connect to. It's a read-only operating system, and there's 2 versions of it. Why are there 2 versions? There's 2 versions because you don't need to spend your life getting a cup of coffee waiting for the spinny circle to be done running updates. Updates are done automatically in the background, invisible to the end user. It just happens. And then the next time they boot it up, it boots into the next version. At the same time, it runs an integrity check on that operating system. If there's a problem with it, it discards it and it reverts back to the previous version so that you are not running a tampered version. You've got Google Safe browsing policies built in. Every Googler will tell you within the first 2 months, they had the same thing happen. They went to a website, they thought it was a Google website, they typed in their corporate security credentials and bang, great big red screen. You have just entered your corporate security credentials on a website that is not run by your corporate environment. You must change your password right now. So when all the other protections fail, if somebody manages to get all the way through all the phishing attacks, last-ditch effort, you blew it. It's okay, but you have to change your password before you proceed. 6-second boot up time. You walk in the door, you grab the Chromebook before you even get to the coffee maker. Your system is up and running and waiting for you. Now, what if you could start looking at doing some of these really cool, innovative things for free? Google purchased a company several years ago. We rolled it into our Chrome fleet. It's called FlexOS. It allows you to take any existing hardware you already have and turn it into a Chromebook. So that entire generation of hardware that you're looking to retire as part of a refresh cycle, that budget you can do something better with, because Chrome OS Flex is free. So take that entire pocket of budget that you were going to use to just put laptops on people's desks and invest it in something that's actually going to drive value, that's going to deliver on your business initiatives and help your end customers in the end. So I mentioned BeyondCorp. BeyondCorp is our zero trust networking capability. This actually plugs into the browser. Doesn't require an agent, doesn't require any kind of special installation. As soon as you log into a Chrome browser using your corporate security credentials, if you have BeyondCorp enabled, boom, it turns on. What does turns on mean? Turns on means when you try to go to a website or an application or data or whatever it is in your browser, immediately, as soon as you make that connection, it says, is this the right person? Are they coming in from a corporate-owned device, or are they coming on from a personal device? Are they using MFA or not? Is this the right time of day for that person to be able to access? Is this the right country that they should be accessing it from? Is there a corporate certificate on the device they're coming in from? There are 5 different user levels, 7 different device level policies that you can assign, so that if somebody wants to see what's for lunch in the cafeteria, they can do that on their personal device from anywhere. If they need to get into payroll, it's going to be locked down to the nth degree, because you need that level of security and protection. Entirely configurable, entirely up to you. How do you want to use it? Ultimately, it's about providing protection. It's about providing protection against malware, against data loss, against phishing. It's all about making sure that you have the control that you need to manage your assets for your customers. And then Google Workspace. Everybody knows Gmail. Everybody knows GDocs. We are continuing to make improvements on the security side in order to make them more secure and to give administrators more control. Because 85% of breaches and break-ins are because of user error. Not necessarily malicious. Somebody just made a mistake. They clicked on the wrong link. They mistyped somebody's email address. They misconfigured a gateway. 85% of the time, somebody oopsed. And the more you can take that opportunity for a mistake off the table, the fewer times it's going to happen. For us, Google Workspace, again, born in cloud, native productivity suite. One of the most amazing things I ever saw. I was on the job for about a month. We got a 4-alarm fire from on high, all hands on deck. We need to provide a perspective paper to senior leadership right now, 5 o'clock on a Friday. Never happens to anybody here, I'm sure. And so 20 of us jumped into the same document at the same time. And it was like watching ants build a cathedral. You're just watching this document as everybody is working on their part. And in an hour, we were all done, because we were able to work in the same document real time, no emailing versions back and forth, no messaging, what do you think, what do you think? It was all right there. Done. Ultimately, again, it's all about providing that protection. Protection against spam, phishing, malware, user error, whether it's on the email side or the document sharing side. It's about putting control in your hands. So what's the elephant in the room? The elephant in the room is that customers come back and say, you know what, David, I love the talk track. I love the vision. Can't do it. We are so embedded in Office 365. We are so a Word shop, an Excel shop. My finance people would get up and walk out if I told them I'm taking Excel away from them. So don't. Everybody can play nice in the sandbox. We have customers every day who coexist between Workspace and Office 365 beautifully. And there's primarily 3 different ways in which that happens. One is they identify areas within their organization that honestly don't need that feature functionality. They're not creating Office documents. They're largely consumers of them. Think of call center, schedulers, frontline workers. These are people who are not taking advantage of the advanced Excel functionality. They just need to be able to open a document and send email. And so for those customers, we actually will help segment off a portion of their organization that runs Workspace from a portion of the organization that runs Office 365, and they can save a lot of money doing that. We have other organizations where their end customers demand to communicate using Workspace tools. They don't want to be sending spreadsheets back and forth. They want to be able to go into Google Sheets. They want to be able to go into Google Docs. And so for them, they may actually have two accounts. They may have inward-facing accounts and external accounts, but because those external accounts are managed by Google, under Google, through their corporate domain, they have all of those security controls about what they can enforce and what people can share and what they can't share. We had a conversation with an international bank not so long ago, and they said, hey, this is kind of interesting. Let's see what happens if we enable our domain for admin control. What they found was there were 20,000 ghost accounts where their employees had created, using their corporate email address, private Gmail accounts, because they had to communicate with their end customers, and that was the only way they could do it. These had protected information, these had financial information, completely outside what corporate security had any visibility to, because people are going to do what they want to do in order to get their job done. Lastly, we have some customers for whom they have identified execs who are so very important, they cannot go down for a few hours if some competing cloud happens to go down. They can't be offline for that long. And so they have Office 365 and Workspace replicating real time. So they can swivel chair at a moment's notice from one to the other, so they don't ever go down. So that's great for all of the stuff that's new and modern and running in cloud. But what about everything else? Everybody has those applications that keep the lights on, that are not browser-based, that are running on legacy technology. How do we get access to those? For us, Citrix is one of our preferred partners to provide that access, either through Virtual Desktop or through virtualized applications. And I'm going to turn it over to Al to talk a little bit more about the capabilities of Citrix and what E360 can do. Please.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. So again, Al Solorzano with E360. I've been doing this technology going on 20 plus years. I know many of the people in the room. I know some of the Googlers that are here. I know people out on the phone call. But realistically, what we're talking about here is trying to take advantage of technology that's being kind of readapted. So Citrix, which is a longtime partner of E360, has developed their technology specifically for the Google platform. The uniqueness of the solution has provided a lot of different options, a lot of different capabilities, and we'll go into those in just 1 second. There we go. So creating Citrix DAS with the Citrix Google Cloud. I'm going to minimize that just for a moment. Sorry, that's on the screen. It's blocking some of my view. Sorry. There we go. So for any of you that are familiar already with the Citrix Cloud solution, you guys have already seen it. It's kind of built for hybrid multi-cloud. This particular solution from Citrix is specifically developed for GCP. What that means is they can take advantage of a lot of the GCP capabilities that the other cloud providers cannot provide today. Great example of that one is the ability, for those of you who are familiar with Citrix technologies, the ability to suspend and resume VMs. So from a cost-saving perspective, usually you have to shut down the machines. Now we actually have an option to pause those machines so we can get some cost savings and quickly bring that back up for the users to gain instant access to their applications when they need it for the next scenario. So what I'd like to talk about with our customers is, look, there's a lot of Citrix partners. There's a lot of GCP partners. There's not a lot of partners that can do both. That's really our expertise, that we can come in here and talk about your current deployment, your current architecture, understand how you guys are leveraging the technology today, and then how you're going to evolve that technology to the future, right? And the future being GCP definitely is a great option. For those of you familiar with PVS, image management tends to be, in the Citrix world, one of the more difficult solutions to kind of address. There's a lot of image updates, the way you're dealing with the constant scenarios of users coming in with new application requests, applications requiring 0-day updates, things like that, that you have to constantly deal with. So there's different technologies on how you can handle it. One of the unique ones that Citrix has developed with Google is to finally support provisioning server, or also known as PVS. So again, for those of you that are familiar with Citrix technologies, PVS has been around for quite some time. It's an image management solution that kind of almost thinks of it like as a gold master image that it boots up from every single time. In this particular scenario, Citrix and Google have developed a solution to support everything together. It's a lot of hard work behind the scenes, and Google was the first one to be able to support it. So faster image creation, rapid machine updates, storage footprints is probably the biggest one, right? So instead of having to have every user have a 40 gig image, what happens is you have one main 40 gig master image as a good example, and everyone has like Delta files. And so it actually is able to save a lot on the storage side, which tends to be where a lot of the cost savings comes from when you combine the two solutions. So PBS first supported by Google within their cloud. This is another interesting one. This was announced a little bit earlier this year, image portability service. So this is a Citrix service that provides the ability to migrate an image from an on-prem deployment into the cloud. So there's of course caveats, there's requirements and versions, and there's, as always, devil's in the details. But the concept of the image portability service is to simplify that image management process. So that way you as the administrators, as you as the IT staff, don't have to deal with the day-to-day troubleshooting of applications and why is one app working, why is it not working. If you're able to build one master image, you're able to bring it in, use the portability service to migrate that service in. There you go. And you're almost back to you're almost ready to come back up here. So image portability service, fairly new, but definitely, again, is a unique functionality between Citrix and GCP to provide that hybrid multi-cloud scenario. The last thing I'll close up before I wrap this up, like I said earlier, one of the things that we're starting to see in our space is while, yeah, legacy applications are on their way down, it's not at the speed that we typically all hope that they're going to be. In fact, a lot of organizations have been telling me, like, quote, we're getting rid of Citrix in the next year or two, only to find out 20 years later, they're actually increasing their usage, right? Because they can't get rid of it. They're still finding things of connections and back-end ties that they can't move it, or they're finding licensing issues with some of their back-end components, or even support. You know, they call their vendor for support. So organizations like E360 are able to kind of take kind of like that legacy concept and help you bridge that into that future. And we're using technologies like Citrix and GCP to kind of go ahead and deliver that best solution. So back over to David to talk about some of the wrap up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So as Al mentioned, you know, we're actually seeing this very large increase in a desire to use virtualization technologies like Citrix to be able to do two things primarily. In order to take advantage of rapid scalability of cloud. So again, don't drop ship a $10,000 workstation to a data scientist's house, spin up that configuration in cloud, let them do what they need to do, turn it off, stop paying for it. And then access to specialized hardware, whether it's our TPUs, GPUs, whatever they need access to. Again, use it when you need it, turn it off when you don't. We're seeing a very high growth in developers especially, who are looking to take advantage of that easy on, easy off capability through virtualization. Now, when you look at running your own Citrix farm on-prem, and I was an administrator way back in the day, I remember doing this, you have to place a bet, usually with your CFO. And the bet is, I'm going to make a capital investment, and in 3 years, this is what my capacity is that I'm going to need. And you place that bet and you put that money down and you make those investments. And 3 years later, you figure out were you right or not. And in the meantime, you've got all of that unused capability sitting there idle. We work with customers and do on-prem assessments using our StrataZone tool. One of the things that it does is not only give an inventory of what's running in your data center, but it also tells you what the utilization is. On average, most data centers run somewhere between 10 and 20% utilization. That means day over day, month over month, week over week, 70 to 80%, 90% of that capacity is just not used, but you're still paying for it. So what's the better answer? The better answer is pay for what you need when you need it. By moving to cloud and having those, especially Citrix-powered capabilities of spinning up, spinning down, don't pay when you're not using it, you're able to drive very meaningful cost savings. And then on top of that, taking advantage of some of the specific capabilities that Citrix plus GCP delivers. such as the Suspend Resume, or we have a capability where we're actually able to disable multi-threading. Essentially what that means is you cut the number of cores that the operating system sees in half, but you virtually double the capability of each one. So your net horsepower stays the same, but for all of your software that's licensed by core, you just dropped your bill in half. And then lastly, what is the most fundamental aspect of a satisfactory virtual desktop or virtualized experience with your end users? Latency. It should look and feel as though it's not virtualized. They want to feel like it's sitting on their desk. Google's global backbone that we own provides a distributed network capabilities that as soon as you get on Google's backbone at the nearest endpoint to that last inch of the last mile, you not only pick up latency speed, you pick up security, and you bring down cost. You're not hopscotching across the globe, across the public internet, until you finally get to your destination. But we can set up network routing such that if you've got offshore development teams, for example, they can get on Google's backbone as close to their location as possible, and then immediately they're within Google's secure network. Okay, great. So that's my end user compute story. But what about all my applications? What about everything else that's running in my data center? What are we going to do about that? If you look at a typical application, legacy application running proprietary technology, monolithic stack, running in a data center, and you peanut butter spread the cost to deliver that functionality. You look at your data center costs, your HVAC, your staffing, your operating system licenses, your database licenses, and you call it $1,000. Just spread it even across everything. $1,000 to deliver that function to your customers or to your end users. Just by getting out of the infrastructure business, just by doing a straight up lift and shift, picking up the exact same environment and replicating it in our Google Cloud VMware engine. So you're on VMware, we have VMware, you can actually connect the two and make one great big pool and just slide things over. Just getting out of the infrastructure business will typically bring your costs down by 40%. So that $1,000 is now $600. I'll come back to the red numbers in a moment. Moving out of a VMware environment into more of a cloud native using our Google Compute Engine drives that 600 down to 4. Now you're starting to move from cloud hosted to cloud managed, taking advantage of our managed database services, our managed Kubernetes and container services, until ultimately you get all the way to cloud native. And at cloud native, you have taken typically 90% of the cost to deliver that functionality off the table. Because you are very granular, you are very precise, you are only paying for the function that you want to deliver, you're using open source tools, you're using cloud native technology. I can tell you firsthand, I've done this journey. I've seen it. It actually is real. Now, what are the red numbers? The red numbers are the tax you pay for doing this, because that expensive licensing software that you're running on-prem, in some cases, those companies refuse to allow you to take those licenses where you want. They put heavy restrictions on what you can do with them, and so you end up having to repurchase some of those licenses in order to take them to cloud. Google has a program where we will help offset that cost and we'll reimburse you for those fees in order to help you along the journey, because once you make this transformation from left to right, that's your new forever. Once you make that investment, you've gone from 1,000 to 100. And our goal is to help you get up that ladder as quickly as possible. Now, you don't have to hit every step on the ladder. If you've got applications that you can containerize immediately, or you've got .NET apps that you can stick in Cloud Run and run them at the edge today, great, let's do that. But if you can't, there is a stepwise function that allows you to start realizing value immediately every step of the way. When we look at how conceptually we sit down and talk to customers about making this transformation, for us, it starts with an assessment. I mentioned we use our StrataZone tool. StrataZone runs on-premise collects an inventory of everything that's running, gives you app dependencies, so you know what servers are talking to what other servers, because you probably want to keep those things together as you migrate them. Gives you utilization numbers, so that you're not picking up a 24-core VM on-prem and turning it into a 24-core in cloud if it only needs to be 4-core. Because now you're running the latest technologies, it's scalable, it's elastic. You can save a lot of money that way. So we go in and we do the assessment, often with our partners. And we now have funding mechanisms in order to help offset your cost to make this transformation by underwriting the partner cost to do the work for you. Because again, skilled technology resources are hard to come by. Going through and identifying what all those workloads are that you have and what the right destination is for them. Some things may be most appropriate in our VMware engine. Some things may be better off containerized. Some things just continue to live in a VM in our Google Compute environment. Working with our partners to create those landing zones and then ultimately to do the migration. And again, we've got funding mechanisms for all steps along that way. And then ultimately through our CAMP program as a partner to our RAMP program, the CAMP program really helps you start analyzing those applications. And how do you not just move them, but how do you modernize them? How do you go from those red boxes to green boxes? And we've got methodology and tools and resources in order to help you do that. So again, as I mentioned, we have our RAMP program, which provides both methodology and funding for our partners to help offset your costs in order to make that journey. And then we have our CAMP program in order to help you envision how to modernize those applications and be able to provide that same functionality fundamentally for less. And that's how we do it. That's what working like Google actually means. It means Chrome plus BeyondCorp plus Workspace plus virtual desktop plus modernized applications. And that's it. If you have any questions, we've got links on here so you can find out more about our partner programs, about E360, about some of our RAMP and CAMP programs. I'm here if you have any additional questions. If you have any questions right now, I'm happy to answer them either at home or here in our studio audience. And questions? Either did a really good job or a really bad job if nobody has any questions. I'm never quite sure.
I'll throw just a
Please.
question that we typically hear from customers.
Great.
Right? Where do they start? Where do they start? Right? Because we talked about
Yep.
a lot of different aspects. Where can they start? Where would be a good first step?
That is actually an excellent question. There's a couple of places to begin. One is just go to Google. You get $300 in free credits, log in, mess around, just play. See how easy some of these tools and capabilities are. We have labs, quick labs, which allow you to actually get very hands-on. And so if you want to see what it looks like to deploy a VM or to bring up a database or to use Cloud SQL, you are actually doing the real deployment in the real console using temporary credentials when you go into our quick labs environment. And our Google sellers can usually provide you credit so that you can go in and do that for free. And then our partners are a wealth of knowledge and experience. They are your guide through the desert. They are the ones who've done this before, who can really sit down and work with you to customize a program and a plan in order to help show you the path to the value, to the security, and to the capabilities that you're largely looking for. Yes?
What would you say some of the competitive advantages of building out this capability using Google over, say, doing something similar with AWS?
It's a great question. Did everybody at home hear? So if you didn't, the question was, what is the advantage of doing this with Google as opposed to a competing cloud? With AWS in particular, they don't have that end user compute capability. They don't really have an equivalent hardware platform or productivity suite. So that's just not a capability that they have. There are other clouds in addition to AWS that do have some of those capabilities. Our perspective is it's still fairly nascent. It's still very complicated. You still don't get away from the security vulnerabilities. You know, Patch Tuesday is still everybody's most critical day. And so you really don't get that advantage of making it easier, centralizing your control, I mean, I will tell you the worst day you're going to get for most IT administrators is 5 o'clock on Friday when you get that phone call and somebody says, yeah, I just lost my laptop and I've got a meeting Monday. Because at that point you're calling home and you're saying, I'm not going to see you for a while. Because now you've got to grab one off the shelf. You've got to drop the image on it. You've got to install all the software that they definitely need. You need to make sure that all of your updates have run so that they're running the latest patches. You've got to try and restore all of their data because you hope that they got the last backup. You've got to make sure that the hard drive was encrypted. Otherwise, you're reporting to the street that you've got a breach. And then you have to make time with them because once you give it to them, there's going to be the invariable, oh, well, wait a minute. I need that other thing that didn't get backed up. Oh, I have this special application that you need to install for me. If you've got a Chromebook and somebody loses a Chromebook, you know what you do? You give them a new Chromebook. And they turn it on and they log in and you're done and you're home for dinner.
Are there any licensing implications going with the Google solution versus another Patch Tuesday provider?
I like that Patch Tuesday provider. There are licensing restrictions if you want to use their technology in conjunction with Google. I can give you a whole PhD course on the ins and outs of it. The short version is there are restrictions on Windows Server licensing being able to bring to other clouds, not Azure, if those licenses are under terms of service post-October 2019. That's why Google will actually reimburse you for those costs when you incur them in Google. The Office licensing has some other nonsense around it with regards to what you are and are not allowed to do, web-based version versus locally installed. So there are some restrictions around what you can do that we work with you to, provide financial relief, as well as really showing you a path so that you don't have to stay chained to these restricted technologies anymore. You actually can function at an enterprise scale quite effectively using technologies that don't start with an M.
One last question. Performance implications of running my desktops in Google Cloud versus the backend provider.
So again, fundamentally, it's latency. It's latency. So by having our globally distributed regions, by having that last inch of the last mile with our network and backbone, really provide the highest fidelity of experience for that end user. In fact, we just had a third-party company do a bunch of testing and evaluation across the 3 major clouds. And we came out across the board for responsiveness, for least latency, for fastest time to boot up, and across the board. We hear consistently, not just from end customers, but even from our partners like Citrix and other virtual desktop partners. Things just go faster in Google. It's newer infrastructure. It's highly tuned and optimized to be able to run at scale, at speed. One of Google's favorite bragging points is we've got 9 applications with 1 billion users. We kind of know how to do stuff at scale.
John gets a backpack.
Yeah.
Yay!
People ask questions?
Yeah, we got more backpacks. It's plenty of window.
Thank you.
What else can I tell you? Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I was curious about the Stratazone software that you referenced. Is that free software? Is that self-guided? Do you get assistance from Google? And is it manipulative, the output?
All of the above. So it is made free by Google. You are welcome to use it. Often you will use it in conjunction with either a partner or a Google sales team. But it allows you to do a couple of things. It runs on-prem, but if you have privacy concerns, if your IP addressing scheme you think is something special, if you have information in server names that you think might be of concern because you're using project or code names, you have the ability to anonymize whatever you want before it gets transmitted to Google and aggregated in our portal, which is how we are then able to distill it down and give you recommendations for what things would look like in Google Cloud, as well as what an equivalent cost would be in another cloud, as well as what it would cost expected to run on-prem. So you've got a lot of control and a flexibility. There's a lot of, it's not prognostication. You've got a lot of capabilities within the tool of showing you what a cloud fit would look like. And again, it's based on your actual utilization. It's not just an inventory like for like. Yes, sir.
Is there any a way to limit where your desktop images remain stateside or certain verticals?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. You can control, you've got all of that control either through Citrix or through Google. More backpacks. Yay.
I mean, technically, there's nothing on it. You can restrict the restriction when they leave the country, and since everything's backed up in country, you lock them down more than I would say official.
Yeah.
Well, it's more of a on the financial sector.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Data has to remain within.
So you can look at front end and you can look at back end. On the back end, you absolutely have the control of where your data is domiciled based on data sovereignty requirements. On the front end, you can configure the laptops using BeyondCorp to say, you can only get to this data if you're coming in from within the continental United States. Or you can only come in from these countries, you can't come in from these other countries. Or you
So you can restrict it on the.
absolutely, that's part of what BeyondCorp does. The other nice thing about BeyondCorp I didn't mention, because it is browser-based, it facilitates supporting a BYO policy. So you can actually enable DLP and other protections through the browser and say, you know what, I'm not going to buy you a computer. You're going to come in and you're going to do some contract work for me, bring your own device, but as soon as you log in through Chrome to your corporate credentials, all of my security policies are going to apply. That's a great question. I don't know. I will be happy to find that out and get back to you if you give me your contact information at the end. That's a good question. Yes, sir. No, it is an upsell. Yeah. Not a real expensive one, but it's a pretty slick one.